Okay, now something else I want to just bring to your attention, some other concepts we need to touch on, is the concept of a multi-tiered approach. Again, a multi-tiered approach to security. So two terms that we need to be aware of. Two-tier versus a three-tier approach. All right, so in a two-tier environment, we have a client and a database server in this example. Okay, a client and a database. In a three-tier model, we would have a client and a server and a database. All right, so everything is interacting or everything is not interacting on the same server. Okay, we can have a one-tier approach where the client actually sits down at a server that has the website on it and also has the database on it. So everything is in one box. That's the least secure. We have a two-tier model where we have a client now accessing a database server through an application. So they're accessing the database directly. That's two-tier. And then in a three-tier model, they would basically access a piece of middleware, in this case a web server, and they're going to interact with the web server. The web server then interacts with the database. So that way the client doesn't have direct access to that database server. They have to go through the web server. So as you add these additional tiers, as you might imagine, you can add additional layers of security because you're abstracting the user, one layer at a time away from the data that is potentially crucial or potentially, damaging if it were to be stolen, compromised, destroyed, what have you. So we can add additional layers of security at each of these different tiers to make it more difficult to be compromised. And then hand in hand with that again talking about application hardening, adding different layers and different tiers of security between the client and the database or the client and the data itself. Application patch management. So applications should be routinely patched as part of a monthly maintenance cycle. Again, if you're in the Microsoft world, you're very familiar with Patch Tuesday. We want to make sure that any zero-day exploits and emergency patching are out of band. We have some type of process to account for that. Because if we're doing patching, the second Tuesday of every month or whatever your schedule might be, and chances are you're not going to patch, this month for the patches that come out in this month, you'll typically wait a month. You'll do some user testing, some regression testing. So you're typically a month behind from when the patches are released, which is fine. Again, it depends upon your environment. But you also want to make sure that you have a process for zero-day exploits, because if something is discovered and it's a highly critical vulnerability, you need to be able to make sure that you can patch that in a timely fashion without having to wait to the next patching cycle. Okay, that's what's referred to as out of band. And then kind of identifying and assessing this, we need to say, does this exploit exist in the current environment and it actually warrant patching? Because again, we want to look at each thing as it comes down and say, okay, well, this is a Linux vulnerability, or this is a Windows vulnerability, and we don't have any of those systems in our environment. Or this might be a Sun server vulnerability. We don't have any Sun servers. Or it may be running, it may be an IIS, vulnerability on a Windows box, but we're not running that anywhere. We run all Apache servers, what have you. So again, it's an assessment process, and that will kind of dictate whether you need to patch, if it's a critical thing you have to push out immediately, or can it wait till the next patching cycle, so on and so forth.